When my phone buzzed with a message from my son after nearly a decade of silence, I thought maybe, just maybe, he wanted to reconnect. What I didn't expect was for that message to pull me into the cruelest holiday betrayal of my life. That's how it started. Not with a fight, not with shouting, but with a simple text. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe, to see more sweet revenge stories. I'm David Lawson. For most of my life, I worked harder than anyone should. I was the guy in town who showed up first and left last, running a small auto repair shop that barely kept the lights on. For years, I lived paycheck to paycheck, clipping coupons while raising my son, Ryan, alone after my wife passed away. He was all I had, and I gave him everything I could. But by the time Ryan was in college, things changed. He wanted more than I could provide: designer clothes, flashy cars, the kind of lifestyle that didn't fit the son of a mechanic. When I couldn't give it to him, he pulled away. Calls went unanswered, visits stopped, and eventually, he cut me off completely. 10 years. That's how long I lived without a word from him. In that decade, fate finally threw me a bone. An investor approached me about buying the land my shop sat on. Turns out, the area was about to explode with development. I sold the land for a sum so big it didn't feel real at first. I closed the shop, invested carefully, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't scraping by, I was comfortable. Wealthy, even. And that's when Ryan reappeared. The text came in early December. Short, casual, as if the last 10 years had never happened. "Dad, hope you're doing well. We'd love for you to join us for Christmas this year." I stared at those words for a long time. We. Who was we? I learned soon enough. Ryan was married now, to a woman named Chloe, and they had a daughter, my granddaughter, Emma, whom I had never met. I'd be lying if I said my heart didn't ache reading that message. 10 years of silence, then suddenly an invitation to Christmas dinner? Still, against my better judgment, I said yes. Part of me longed for family again, for the warmth I'd lost. I should have trusted my gut. The first sign that something was off came when I arrived at their house on Christmas Eve. The place was huge, far beyond what Ryan could have afforded as a kid who once begged me for gas money. Marble countertops, a tree so tall it scraped the ceiling, gifts piled so high they looked like they belonged under Rockefeller Center's pine. Chloe greeted me with a polite but cold smile. Emma, bright-eyed and innocent, clung shyly to her mother's side. And Ryan, well, he hugged me like no time had passed. But I could see it in his eyes. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about something else. Dinner was served, laughter filled the room, and for a moment, I allowed myself to believe. But then the conversation shifted. Ryan leaned back in his chair, swirling wine in his glass, and asked about my new life. How had I been? What had I been up to? And, most importantly, what did I do with the money from selling the shop? That's when it hit me. This wasn't about Christmas. This wasn't about family. Ryan didn't invite me to rebuild a bond. He invited me because I was useful again. I kept my answers vague, brushing off the details. But Chloe pressed harder, her smile sharp as glass. It must feel so nice to finally enjoy the good life after all those years in that little garage. I smiled back, but inside, my stomach turned. As the night went on, the hints became clearer. They asked if I had considered investing in family ventures. They joked about how Emma would love a college fund from Grandpa's success. Chloe even brought up retirement homes, slyly suggesting that I must want peace of mind as I got older. It was all wrapped in laughter and casual tone, but I heard the truth. They weren't inviting me back into their lives. They were circling me like vultures. I went home that night with a pit in my chest, torn between longing for family and rage at being treated like a wallet. But I didn't confront them. Not yet. Because as much as it hurt, part of me needed to see just how far they were willing to go. And by New Year's Eve, I would have my answer, one that would shatter everything I thought I knew about betrayal. When I left Ryan's house that night, the glow of Christmas lights on their perfect street mocked me. Families gathered inside warm living rooms, wrapping paper littering the floor, laughter echoing through the frosted air. And there I was, standing outside my son's mansion, feeling like an outsider in the very life I had once dreamed of giving him. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe's tight smile, Ryan's calculated questions, the way they had looked at me not as a father or guest, but as a resource waiting to be tapped. I told myself maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe they had been clumsy with their words, and my bitterness filled in the blanks. But that hope shattered the very next week. Ryan invited me back for family brunch. I went, because Emma was there, and because a part of me still clung to the idea that I might have a place in my son's world again. Chloe greeted me with exaggerated warmth, offering fresh coffee and pressing Emma into my arms as if that gesture alone proved her sincerity. For a moment, holding that little girl, I let my guard down. She had my eyes, innocent, curious. She giggled when I bounced her on my knee, and for a fleeting second, I imagined being the grandparent I'd never been allowed to be. Then Ryan cleared his throat and ruined it. Over eggs and pancakes, he laid it out, thinly veiled as sharing plans. He wanted to start a real estate venture. He had contacts, he said, people who could make money grow fast. Chloe chimed in, praising his vision, adding that what they really needed was a little seed capital. Not much, just a few $100,000 to get the ball rolling. I sipped my coffee and listened. They made it sound so casual, like it was nothing for me, like writing a check would be as easy as passing the salt. Ryan smiled as if he expected me to agree without hesitation. But I didn't. I played dumb. I told them I wasn't sure how much I had left from the sale, that I'd been cautious with my spending. I watched their smiles falter ever so slightly, the flicker of irritation behind their eyes. That's when I knew. This wasn't about mending fences. This was a strategy. They had rehearsed this. And I wasn't their father in this plan, I was their mark. The following weeks only confirmed it. Chloe began calling me more often, always under the guise of family bonding. She'd drop hints about how responsible families invest together, or how Emma deserves every opportunity money can buy. Her tone dripped with politeness, but the pressure was constant. Ryan, on the other hand, started acting like he was already in control of my finances. He'd casually mention how it would be smart for me to transfer assets into joint accounts, or how everyone his age helped their parents manage wealth. It was always wrapped in laughter, but the suggestion was clear: he wanted my money in his hands. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I let them believe their net was closing around me, while quietly weaving a trap of my own. The first step was information. I reached out to my old friend Alan, a retired attorney who owed me a favor. Over coffee at a diner, I laid out everything: Ryan's sudden return, Chloe's polished pressure, the not-so-subtle hints about my wealth. Alan listened, nodding, then said, "David, you need to protect yourself. Paperwork. Evidence. Witnesses. If they're trying to corner you, the best thing you can do is let them think they're winning, while you build your defense." That's exactly what I did. I began keeping meticulous notes. Every phone call, every conversation, every text. I saved Chloe's cheerful messages about family ventures. I documented Ryan's jokes about moving money. I even installed a small recording device in my jacket pocket during visits. Their careless words, spoken in the comfort of their own home, became evidence. Meanwhile, Alan helped me restructure my accounts. We created trusts, moved assets, set up legal protections that no amount of persuasion or guilt-tripping could penetrate. On paper, it looked as though I still had the wealth sitting neatly in my name. In reality, much of it was already untouchable. The next time Chloe tried to corner me over wine, suggesting I consider my legacy, I smiled and nodded, promising to think it over. And when Ryan handed me a glossy folder with investment opportunities, I took it with a grateful grin, telling him I'd look into it. Inside, I was boiling. But outside, I played the part. Because here's the thing about betrayal, you can't fight it head-on when it's dressed up as love. You have to let it grow, let it expose itself, until the mask slips all on its own. And slowly, the cracks began to show. One afternoon, I overheard Chloe on the phone. She was in the kitchen, her voice low but not low enough. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Once it's transferred, it'll all be in Ryan's name. He'll make sure his dad is taken care of." The words made my blood run cold. Taken care of. It wasn't just about money anymore. They weren't thinking about me as family at all, they were planning a future without me in it. I left their house that day with Emma's hug still warm on my neck and a decision burning in my chest. I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to make sure Ryan and Chloe understood exactly what it meant to betray the man who built the ground they stood on. And the perfect opportunity was already on the horizon: Christmas Day itself. Christmas morning has a way of making the world feel softer. Snow muffles the streets, children's laughter fills the air, and for a few fleeting hours, it feels like life slows down. But as I drove to Ryan's house that day, the softness didn't reach me. My chest was tight, my thoughts sharp. I knew what awaited me wasn't family, it was theater. And I was the audience they planned to fool. The house glowed like something out of a magazine spread. Lights twinkled from the roofline, a wreath big enough to cover half the door, and inside, the smell of cinnamon and roasted ham drifted out into the cold. Chloe greeted me with overdone cheer, her sequin dress sparkling in the morning light. "Dad!" Ryan boomed, wrapping me in a hug that felt rehearsed. Emma squealed, tugging at my hand, and for her sake alone I forced a smile. She was the only innocent in this charade. We gathered around the towering Christmas tree, gifts spilling into the living room like an avalanche of wrapping paper. Chloe handed out presents with practiced grace: designer watches, silk scarves, expensive toys for Emma. When it was my turn, Ryan handed me a thin box with a grin. Inside was a leather folder. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. "Thought you'd like something practical, Dad," he said, his tone light but his eyes locked on mine. I flipped it open. Inside was a stack of documents, transfer papers, joint account agreements, and a draft of a family trust that listed Ryan as trustee. The message was clear: this was my gift to them. The room seemed to shrink. Chloe leaned forward, her smile stretched thin. "We just thought it would be easier this way. No stress, no confusion. You can enjoy retirement, and Ryan can make sure everything runs smoothly." I looked at the papers, then at them, and for a moment I almost laughed. They had wrapped their greed in ribbon and bows, presented it as love. The audacity would have been impressive if it hadn't cut so deep. But I didn't lash out. Not yet. Instead, I set the folder gently on my lap and nodded. "I'll think about it," I said quietly. Ryan and Chloe exchanged a glance, smugness flickering between them. They thought they'd won. The rest of the morning played out like a performance. Toasts to family, carefully worded comments about building the future, even a staged conversation where Chloe mused about how wonderful it will be when Emma knows her grandfather made everything possible. I nodded, smiled, played along. But inside, I was taking mental notes, recording every word in the theater of my memory. By the time dinner rolled around, the show had grown stale. I watched as Ryan carved the ham, watched as Chloe refilled glasses, watched as Emma twirled in her Christmas dress, blissfully unaware. And I realized something: if I stayed silent, they'd keep circling, keep pressing, until one day I really was powerless. That night, as snow fell thick outside their wide bay window, I excused myself early. I drove home in silence, parked in the driveway, and sat in the dark car staring at the house Isabel and I had built decades earlier. My hands shook, but not with fear, with resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity. It was about reclaiming my place as more than a wallet with a heartbeat. So I began final preparations. Alan had already secured the trusts and legal protections, but now I wanted something more visible. Something that would not only protect me but expose Ryan and Chloe for what they were. We compiled every message, every document, every recording. We highlighted Chloe's words about, once it's transferred, and Ryan's constant nudges toward joint accounts. We even printed copies of the Christmas gift, the transfer papers they had so proudly placed in a leather folder under the tree. I arranged meetings with my bank, my attorney, and even the family friends Ryan and Chloe liked to flaunt in front of. Quietly, I made sure people knew what was happening, not gossip, but facts. The stage they had built for their triumph was about to become the stage for their humiliation. Because here's the thing about betrayal, it grows in the dark. But once you drag it into the light, it rots fast. On New Year's Eve, Ryan and Chloe planned to host a lavish dinner party for friends and colleagues, a celebration of new beginnings. Invitations had gone out weeks before, boasting of champagne, fine dining, and a special announcement. I wasn't supposed to know about it. But Chloe, careless in her arrogance, mentioned it in a text she thought I wouldn't see. That was my chance. That would be the night their empire of lies came crashing down. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For weeks, I had played the fool, let them believe I was malleable, weak, easy to manipulate. But the truth was, I had been sharpening my blade in silence. And soon, very soon, would cut through every illusion they had built. Christmas morning should have been about laughter, warmth, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to patch the holes left in my family. Instead, it turned into a performance so polished it might as well have been rehearsed. Their home gleamed like a catalog cover. A 10-foot tree glittered with glass ornaments, a mountain of gifts towered beneath it, and soft carols played from hidden speakers. Chloe floated around in a red sequin dress, offering me cider with a smile that never touched her eyes. Ryan pulled me into a hug, firm and cheerful, as if 10 years of silence had never existed. And Emma, wide-eyed and innocent, clung to my leg in a way that almost broke my resolve. She was the only reason I endured any of this charade. We opened gifts one by one, their pile always larger, more expensive, more extravagant. When it was my turn, Ryan handed me a leather folder, tied neatly with a gold ribbon. "Something practical, Dad," he said with a grin that was just a little too sharp. Inside were legal documents, transfer forms, joint account agreements, even a draft of a family trust with Ryan listed as sole trustee. For a moment, the world went quiet. Chloe leaned in, her voice syrupy sweet. "It's all standard. Just paperwork that ensures everything is organized. That way you can enjoy life, and Ryan can handle the details." I closed the folder, resting my hand on it as though I were considering. "I'll think about it," I said, my tone even. Their eyes lit up. They thought I was already halfway to surrender. But I wasn't. From that day on, the pressure grew. Ryan started dropping by my house unannounced. He'd walk through my front door like he still lived there, asking about my portfolio, as though he had any right to the details. He'd remind me of chores I hadn't gotten to, snow shoveling, leaky pipes, as though I were incapable of handling my own life. His tone wasn't helpful, it was possessive. Like he was already taking stock of what would soon be his. Chloe was subtler. She called often, her voice dripping with concern. "David, have you thought about the paperwork? It would give us all such peace of mind. Families thrive when everyone contributes." When I didn't answer the way she wanted, she'd pivot, talking about Emma's future, the rising cost of education, how grandparents had a responsibility to secure their grandchildren's lives. Each word was designed to tug at my guilt. But the worst moment came a week after Christmas. Ryan invited me to brunch again, but this time he wasn't alone. He introduced me to a man named Brent, a financial advisor, he claimed. Brent laid out glossy brochures for investment opportunities, and every single one funneled through Ryan. "Your son has vision," Brent said with a salesman's grin. "This could double your retirement fund in a few short years." Ryan leaned back, casual, but his eyes burned into mine. He wasn't asking any more. He was daring me to refuse. I played along. I asked questions, nodded at charts, even said I'd consider moving some funds around. But when I excused myself and walked to my car, my hands were shaking with fury. That night, I called Alan. "They're getting bolder," I said. "They're not just circling me, they're trying to corner me." Alan's voice was calm but firm. "Good. Let them. The deeper they go, the stronger your case becomes. But David, you need to decide. Do you just want protection? Or do you want justice?" I didn't hesitate. "I want them to understand what they've done. I want them to feel it." So I doubled down. I saved every voicemail, every text, every helpful suggestion. I photocopied the Christmas gift, highlighting Ryan's name on the trustee line. I even recorded Brent's pitch at brunch, his words a perfect example of how far they were willing to manipulate. And then, as if the universe wanted to hand me a stage, Chloe slipped. She texted me late one evening, accidentally including me in a group thread with Ryan. Her words chilled me to the bone. "Once everything's signed, we'll move Dad into assisted living. Ryan can handle the accounts without distraction." Without distraction. That was how they saw me. I didn't reply. I didn't confront her. I simply saved the screenshot, sent it to Alan, and sat back in my chair with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about guilt anymore. It wasn't about family or forgiveness. It was about control, plain and simple. And they had shown their hand. Meanwhile, Chloe began planning a massive New Year's Eve dinner party. Invitations went out to Ryan's colleagues, Chloe's social circle, even old family friends I hadn't seen in years. The invite boasted of champagne, a catered feast, and a very special announcement at midnight. I wasn't supposed to know about it. But Vanessa, one of Chloe's own friends, let it slip when I bumped into her at the grocery store. "Looking forward to the big Lawson bash," she said cheerfully. "Chloe's been telling everyone it'll be unforgettable." Unforgettable, indeed. They had built the stage. They had gathered the audience. They had scripted the moment they thought would secure their future. And I would be there, not as their victim, but as the man who would tear the curtain down. New Year's Eve arrived with all the polish Chloe could muster. Their house was lit like a palace, tables groaning under catered dishes, champagne chilling in buckets of ice. Guests laughed in the living room, clinking glasses, oblivious to the storm about to roll in. I wasn't invited, of course. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this special announcement. But I showed up anyway, wearing my old black coat, the same one I used to wear to the garage on freezing mornings. A reminder of where I came from. A reminder of what they had forgotten. When Chloe saw me in the doorway, her smile faltered for a split second before she plastered it back on. "David," she cooed, too loudly, "what a surprise." Ryan appeared behind her, his jaw tightening. "Dad," he said flatly, "you should have called." "I figured family didn't need invitations," I replied. My voice was steady, but my heart was thundering. They didn't dare turn me away in front of their guests. Instead, they ushered me inside, poured me a glass of champagne, and pretended everything was fine. But I saw the flickers, the dart of Chloe's eyes toward Ryan, the stiffness in his laugh. As midnight drew closer, the energy in the room shifted. Chloe stood near the fireplace, gathering everyone's attention with a practiced tap of her glass. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice bright and commanding. "Tonight is about celebrating new beginnings, family, and the future we're building together." She glanced at Ryan, who stepped forward with the leather folder I knew too well. My stomach turned as he laid it on the table like an offering. "This," he said, voice booming with false pride, "is the next chapter. A trust that secures my father's legacy for generations. With me as trustee, we'll ensure Emma's future and strengthen everything my father worked for." The room filled with polite applause, champagne glasses raised. Guests smiled, unaware of the poison beneath the words. That was when I stepped forward. "Funny thing about trusts," I said, loud enough to cut through the clapping. The room quieted. Ryan's eyes widened, Chloe's lips tightened. I walked to the table, picked up the folder, and flipped it open with deliberate care. "This is the gift you gave me at Christmas, isn't it?" All tied up with a bow. Ryan swallowed hard. "Dad, not now." But I wasn't listening. I pulled out the stack of papers I had brought in my own folder, thicker and stamped with seals. "Here's the problem," I said, my voice cold. "This trust doesn't exist. Not legally. Not anymore. Because weeks ago, every asset I owned was moved into an irrevocable fund with a trustee who isn't you. Every dollar, every deed, every account, untouchable. Protected. Out of your reach." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chloe's face drained of color. Ryan tried to laugh, waving a hand dismissively. "Dad, you're confused. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I cut in, pulling a single page from my folder. It was the screenshot of Chloe's text, the one about moving me into assisted living. I held it high enough for the front row to see. "You weren't planning to take care of me. You were planning to erase me. To treat me as a distraction while you drained me dry." The silence that followed was suffocating. Guests exchanged glances, uncomfortable whispers buzzing through the air. Brent, the so-called financial advisor, slipped quietly toward the door. Chloe stammered, "That's out of context." "Context?" I snapped. "Here's context." I laid down another sheet, transcripts of recordings, notes of every time Ryan had joked about joint accounts, every time Chloe had nudged me about transferring assets. Their own words, documented, undeniable. Ryan's face crumpled. His polished mask slipped, replaced by desperation. "Dad, please. We can fix this. We were just trying to help." "Help?" I said, my voice low but sharp. "You invited me back into your life for one reason. Not because I'm your father. Not because you wanted me to know my granddaughter. But because you thought I was weak enough to strip for parts." The room was dead quiet. Guests who had once admired their wealth now stared at them with something closer to disgust. Chloe's sequin dress glittered under the chandelier, but she looked small, cornered, like a magician caught in her own trick. I set the final blow on the table, a notarized letter from my attorney confirming the transfers into scholarship funds and community programs. "This is where the money went," I said. "To kids who deserve a chance. To tradesmen who want to build a life. To people who understand the value of hard work. Not to greed. Not to manipulation." Ryan's lips parted, but no words came. Chloe looked around the room, searching for allies, but found none. I tucked my folder under my arm, turned to the guests, and said simply, "Enjoy your evening." Then I walked out, leaving their empire of lies to collapse in the silence behind me. The cold night air hit my face like baptism. For the first time in years, I felt free. The night after the New Year's Eve party, I sat in my quiet living room, the clock ticking past midnight. Outside, the faint pop of fireworks echoed through the town, but in my chest there was no celebration, only a hollow calm, like the silence after a storm. For years, I had dreamed of hearing from my son again. I thought about what it would feel like to see his face, to hear him call me Dad after so long. I never imagined that reunion would end in betrayal. But now, staring at the embers glowing in my fireplace, I realized something. The fantasy was gone, and with it, the grip Ryan had held over me. The fallout from that night came fast. Word spread through their circle quicker than wildfire. Chloe's special announcement turned into a whispered scandal. The people they had carefully courted, Ryan's colleagues, Chloe's social friends, even Brent the so-called financial advisor, wanted nothing to do with them. Business deals dried up. Invitations disappeared. The glittering life they had built on my back crumbled in weeks. By February, their house was on the market. Whispers said they couldn't keep up with the payments now that the flow of easy money had stopped. Chloe was spotted more than once storming out of cafes, her voice sharp on the phone. Ryan, once so smug and untouchable, now walked with shoulders slumped, avoiding eye contact when he passed people in town. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't seek them out. I went about my life with quiet dignity. I met with Alan often, finalizing the scholarship fund in Isabel's name. Seeing those young students' faces, kids who reminded me of her bright spirit, filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I set up apprenticeships in my old trade, giving others the same chance I once fought for with nothing but a toolbox and a rusted pickup truck. Neighbors stopped me at the store, at church, on the street. They'd pat me on the shoulder and say, "You did the right thing, David. You stood your ground." Their words meant more than I expected. For so long, I had felt invisible. Now, I was seen, not as a victim, but as a man who had chosen his dignity over deceit. But it wasn't all victory. Some nights, the silence of my house felt heavier than usual. I'd find myself staring at the phone, wondering if Ryan would call. Wondering if, somehow, he might finally see me as more than a wallet with a heartbeat. Then, one cold February evening, he did. He showed up on my porch, no smile, no rehearsed charm. Just Ryan, tired, hollow, carrying the weight of his own choices. "Dad," he said quietly, his voice cracking, I messed up." For a long time, I didn't answer. I studied his face, searching for sincerity. There was no arrogance now, no gleam of calculation. Just shame. "You'll always be my son," I said finally. "But forgiveness isn't free, Ryan. If you want redemption, it won't come from me handing you another chance. It'll come from you proving you've changed." He nodded, eyes glassy, and left without another word. I don't know if he'll ever change. Chloe, from what I hear, left him not long after, unwilling to weather the storm she helped create. Maybe that was her own version of survival. As for Emma, I made sure to send gifts, not money, but books, toys, and letters. She was innocent in all of this, and I refused to let her grow up thinking her grandfather had abandoned her. Someday, when she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her the truth. Not the bitterness, not the betrayal, but the lesson, that love is earned, not bought. That spring, I hosted my own small gathering. No sequins, no catered feast, no champagne towers. Just neighbors, friends, and a few of the students from the scholarship program. We shared food, laughter, and memories of Isabel. For the first time in a long time, the house was full again. When I raised my glass that evening, I didn't toast to revenge. I toasted to resilience, to the strength of rebuilding after betrayal, to the knowledge that sometimes the sweetest victories are quiet ones. Ryan and Chloe had tried to erase me from my own legacy. But in the end, all they erased was themselves. And I was still standing.